he probably landed on self-deprecation. This is a conjuncture at this point. I don't know in the scriptures exactly what he was thinking in prison, but he probably could one day be like, dude, this sucks. Like, what, I am a loser. How did I get here? But then I'm sure other days he was like going back to the dream that God gave him and like, oh man, but there's got to be something here and there's got to be a purpose and it's going to be beautiful, and sort of pre-living this dream. I feel like his dream was a gift to just like get him through the dark times until it was realized. So I think affirmations and the getting back to the joy and the dream, that's probably the only thing I could hold on to. You got to have, confess some truth telling, but then you got to have some other truth come back in and fill that void. Otherwise, you're going to stay in self-deprecation mode forever.
Graham, my friend, this has been a long time coming. We have some mutual friends. I'm just so glad to finally welcome you to the podcast.
Oh man, this is a trip for me, and I'll be honest. You know who's more excited about this than me, which is hard to be more excited than me, is my mom.
I guess? Yeah, I was gonna.
It's my mom, bro. Maria, if you're listening, and I know you are, you're like, listening. Yes, two of my favorite people, Chris Cook and my son. So,
well, like, okay, so paint that picture for me. How did she tell you about me? I don't know if we've talked about this.
Yeah, so I got into a Jamie Winship kick.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And then I got my mom into the Jamie Winship kick, and when she gets on a kick, she's gone. Especially if it's a really great, Christian thought leader or author. And so she went. I thought I went down a rabbit trail with Jamie. She went down a deeper rabbit trail, and she started to send me episodes of your show because you've had Jamie on a bunch.
Oh yeah,
and that's how I got into your show. Oh, but then she's like a super fan, bro. Like I know you got lots of super fans. Maria Cochrane is one of them.
Hi, Maria. We love you. Grant, I'm just pumped today. You and I have similar stories, yet unique stories. But I told you before we hit record, I wanted to start here because I want to sort of hit the nerve of our current cultural moment. Because if we don't, what I don't want people to do is just walk away from conversations like this and say, okay, how do I distract myself with another silver bullet fix that's not going to get to the root issues, that's not going to cause me to become whole from the inside out, that I can be effective in whatever God's called me to be? And so you and I were talking about fear at the onset, and I think the timing of this conversation is really spot on. We're in culture's on fire right now. This past weekend, just 48 hours ago, we saw the first presidential assassination attempt in 43 years. I think politics are downstream of culture in a way. I think fear is driving a lot. I think shame is driving a lot. Let's just kind of tip our hats to Jamie. This is like, we've got the fists up. It's self-protection, self-promotion. So let's start here. When people are afraid, when fear is a dominant driver in our lives, you're a coach, how does that affect our decision-making? Super broad, but I want to massage this as we begin. When fear is that driver, what happens internally that causes us to make decisions in this way?
Dude, fear is the worst because, so if we're people of faith and we believe that God speaks to us and he reveals himself in Scripture as one who speaks in a still small voice, and he's not going to yell at you unless he really needs to get your attention, and he'll yell in different ways. But most of the time he's whispering. He's not in the fire, he's not in the earthquake, he's not in the hurricane, he's in that still small voice. And the problem with that is that he's not going to turn up the volume. We have to turn down the other competing sounds in our mind. And I think fear is just the loudest one that will like cloud out any sense of clarity. So if you're trying to make a decision, I coach business owners a lot, but it's any kind of decision you're making, there's consequences. They're all significant. Should I take this job? Should I move my family? Should we have another child? Should we put them in this school? Should we pull them out of this school? Whatever the decision is, if you're basing it out of fear of what might go wrong or fear of judgment or whatever fill in the blank fear is, like you're never going to make an accurate decision. It's literally one-sided. Like there's I'm not an expert on parts theory or this idea, internal family systems, but it's certainly accurate to say that fear is a voice that can be useful. It's good to imagine that table of multiple, people at your board of advisors that table, and fear is one of those people saying, hey, you might want to consider these potential things that might happen. Okay, thank you for that data. I will input that, but I'm not going to let fear be the decision maker. He or she is just someone that can sit at the table. And so, but I don't think we do that. I think we just hear fear and that's what makes the decision. So it's never well informed. We're never concerned about what might go right. We're never thinking about how we're wired or what God has to say. We're just making a decision based off of fear. And so it's never truly, I think, the decision we would make if all things were equal and we had all the data. And it clouds out all the other data.
Yeah, this is interesting. Let's stay here. So what I hear you saying, Graham, is when a default mindset narrative of scarcity and poverty, a poverty spirit, a poverty mindset, a scarcity mindset are at the baseline of our decision making, accuracy then goes out the window. You had touched on accuracy. You want to nuance that. What's your thought on, or perhaps the connection between accuracy? I think about a scripture like Ephesians 5:15. Paul's talking and he says, I pray that you live purposefully, worthily, and here it is, Graham, accurately, not as the unwise, but as the wise, knowing full well the will of the Lord. I love that adverb, living accurately. If we want to live accurate lives, in other words, we see the target, we hit the target. We'll just stay on the metaphor, how does a poverty spirit, a scarcity mindset pull us off course? All fear again.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting deep real fast, bro. I'm going to try to catch up with you. Let me think. I mean, when I see it in business, let's just use that as an example.
Sure, it's great. Yeah.
I see it's like the fear, whatever the fear is they have, like fear that this business idea won't work out, that the business will fall apart, whatever. It's like they're clinging to it so tightly. And it's like the visual I have is their grip. They're holding on to, whether it's a rope or it's comfort. Like they won't let go. They're white knuckling. They're like, but what if this happens? What if this happens? And so all of their effort and their attention and their energy is focused on this thing. I'm over here trying to get them to loosen the grip and say, hey, what about these other potential things? What about the way you're designed? What about, especially if I'm speaking to a Christian business owner, what if God has told you this? Like, what about that? And so I think the fear just keeps them so myopic on one potential outcome or series of outcomes that it's like so zoomed in. And I just want them to zoom out. And one of my friends and coaches, Julia Wood, had said years ago, like trying to tell yourself what else could be as true, if not more true, than this potential fear that you have, and letting yourself at least get curious about other potential outcomes, even if you don't want to believe them yet. She just has that nice little nuance of, well, what else could be as true, if not more true, than the belief you're currently holding on to? And I try to get people to go there to at least consider other alternatives, and it sort of puts them in a more neutral space, and it does create more neural pathways in your brain where you can start to think again, because you can actually think really, really deeply, but when you get fearful, your thinking just gets so tunnel vision, you can't think accurately to your word. Yeah. And the thought that came up real quick was just that passage where Paul says, like God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but of sound mind and power, like self-control, like a sound mind. I feel like that accurate thinking, self-control, yeah, like that. Those are the contrasting thoughts. Fear is not the same as a sound mind. And sound mind is not the same as fear. You have to choose. What do you want, a sound mind or fear?
Yeah, so this is on the nose for this audience today, because the question I want to ask is this. Curiosity internally requires what? The reason why this is such an important question to me, my friend, is because too many of us, whether unknowingly or knowingly, live with the default paradigm question, what was, and I live from. Not many folks are willing to lean over the cliff and ask the question, what if? What if? How do we develop? I'm not talking like life hack here, guys. How do we develop the fundamental I believe that I'm able, with permission, with the strength of the Lord to ask the question, what if? What does that curiosity require, Graham? This could change the narrative for a lot of folks listening today, and we're going to break something today, I believe. We're going to break a mindset.
Well, it's interesting because I think it's really easy for people when we were kids, like, because there's so much joy attached to what if, right? Like when we were kids, what if was like the easiest, most natural thing because, oh, what if we could go to the beach this summer? What if, like, you know, my mom actually buys like Fruit Loops instead of, you know, something unhealthy? Like, what if I could be an NBA player? What if is always fun because it's attached to joy? And so I think that's our natural state, our childlike state that Jesus talks about. Not childish, but childlike. Children, what if is fun, and so there's joy. And I think we've gotten that joy sucked out of us. And so what if becomes like we've actually like the world's rebranded what if to just be doom and gloom. What if this happens? What if this happens? And so I think if there's no joy attached to it, you can't force someone to be curious. But if they could get to a place of, oh, what if this wonderful thing could happen? You get retrained in the what if based around joy.
Okay, you just touched something massively important. You know, guys, Graham and I are both believers, as you know, and so this is really cool that we can bring the library of Scripture into this and eternal wisdom. You talked about the commodity of joy. I read Scripture, and I read in Nehemiah that the joy of the Lord is our what? It's our strength. So strength empowers us through the commodity of joy. Strength then empowers us to take risk, to open our mind, to say, Lord, I'm not going to live reactive to life. Therefore, I can lean over the proverbial cliff and say, what if? Because the joy of the Lord is my strength. We're not talking about living haphazard, sloppy lives. What we are talking about is a firm foundation rooted in our core identity in Christ, fueled by the joy of the Lord that is our strength, that recognizes that he who began a good work in us is faithful to bring it to pass for his glory. Curiosity and joy, anchor points for life, anchor points for your life, Graham, because when you were 26 years old during the recession, you lost your job. It was a critical spot for you. Take us back, set us up, tell us the story, and then teach us how I believe. I mean, dude, like, you're not like a random occurrence in life, Graham. 26 years old, lose your job, and all of a sudden you like life hacked your way to this. You had a foundation at least birthed in you through adversity that shaped something in you. That's what I want to get under the hood of. You want to unpack that?
Yeah, man. I mean, 26 for
Welcome
context.
Welcome to the podcast, my dude.
Yeah, I love it, man. I was prepared. I was like, we're just gonna jump in the deep end from moment one.
My buddy Ian Simpkins, one of my best friends, Ian Simpkins, and I, that's what we do. We're like, let's just hit record and go. So I love it, dude. It's our relationship too, and I love it.
Oh, heck yeah, man. I mean, context, I'm 26 and I'm married. I have a brand new baby and we just bought a house and we just moved 1,000 miles away to Tampa, Florida, where I live now, to help a buddy plant a church. So that's the context of, I'm not a single 26-year-old just winging it. I'm having to be responsible. And I've kind of floated for 4 years in jobs that I hated, primarily because my big dream died when I was like pursuing the dream of being a rock star. At age 22. So I'm like bitter for 4 years, and we can go there if you want later, but I was bitter at the Lord. It was like, forget dreaming, forget joy, forget curiosity. Like, I guess that's not possible for normal people like me. So I had been 4 years of bitterness and resentment, and then I'm 26, bought our house, had our baby, moved away, and then I had lost 2 jobs during a 10-month span during the global recession. This is 2009. And I just kind of felt, I lost one like earlier. So yeah, it was a mess. And it was like not just the pain of when you lose a job, it's like painful, right? Like everyone needs an income. When you lose a job in a recession and it's hard to get a job, that's painful. But I had the other layer, and I don't know if you've ever felt this, Chris, where it was like shame. It was like that shame layer of, dude, what am I doing with my life? Like,
yeah, what did shame say to you? I don't want to interrupt, but like,
it said like you're a failure. You should be embarrassed. Like you've wasted time. All your friends are like well on their way towards a legitimate career path, and now you've got a family to support, and you don't really have any marketable skills. You have a music background. Yeah, you got a college degree, but I applied to 50 jobs in 2009. Took me 50 applications to get a job. Like, it was like crazy. It was a weird time. So I just felt shame and embarrassment, and still bitter that I wasn't doing anything that I wanted to do. Like, my dreams were out the window. I was just trying to find a way to make a living. So yeah, that was sort of the soup we were in. My wife, Shay, asked if we could apply for SNAP, food stamps, because she had a friend whose husband lost his job. It was paying like $500, $600 a month for your groceries, and we needed it. We had burned through savings, and I had told her flat out no. I said no. I'm not. That's not who we are. Like, I had a lot of judgments around people that even took government handouts. I was like, that's not who we are. We're not going to take handouts. And she kept coming back. She's like, babe, we really need this. We applied for that. We got in. We qualified. So 18 months. I'm using my EBT card. I'm going to the grocery. It was a humbling, like, I can't even pay for groceries. Like, it was a low point of shame and embarrassment for me. But it was in that was the moment that God decided to give me weird, to me, ideas like, what if you started a business? What if you created a blog and a YouTube channel? Like, and this is 2009. Like, I didn't even know the business model I was getting into at the time, but it was like whiteboard, clean slate. I was scared, but I was also like hungry to do something more fulfilling. Like, I really didn't want another job. I needed one, but I didn't want another job. I'm not a guy that's meant to sit at a cubicle and wear an oversized shirt and a goofy tie. It just didn't fit me. So that was where God really, turned things at the corner for me.
I apologize for interrupting, but you said something that strikes a note with me, and it is that fear and hunger can coexist. I was afraid and hungry. We pull the thread on that. In other words, I think to an extent, certainly fear can be a motivator. I don't believe we should be driven by and our lives directed by fear. But for you and for folks joined with us today, Graham, fear and hunger can coexist how? And could you leverage existing fear in your life to push through resistance, like in the language of Stephen Pressfield? Thoughts?
Yes, 100%. But let me use myself as like a case study. I am not a person that has really ever struggled with being hungry and wanting to push through. So if you do personality tests land, if you do Enneagram type land, like, I'm going to land on a 3 as an achiever. On Strength Finders, I'm going to land at futuristic, like, I'm thinking about where are we going? How can we reverse engineer this? I'm highly motivated to go out there and do something. So that is my strength, and it is my weakness. The strength is that I'm not going to put things off. I'm not going to sit around. I'm going to go do something and find a way to make it work, even if I don't know what I'm doing. The weakness is it's hard for me to turn that off. It's like I still operate sometimes, Chris, 15 years later, removed from being broke. I operate out of that fear and hunger. And I've even had the Lord say, like, he used Isaiah 30:15 for me. And we might have talked about this on years ago of like, in returning to the Lord and resting shall be your strength. And that word to return is to withdraw from war or to retire from the battlefield. And like, when I was talking to him about my fear, he was like, he literally was saying, your like hands are clenched around weapons of war as if it was 15 years ago when you had to fight to build something. There's no battle right now, bro. You don't have to fight to feed your family anymore. And yet you're still in that posture of fight. And I'm really good at that. And so that's my weakness as well, is that I don't know how to just rest. The hunger is still there. The fear of, what if it all goes away, is still there. That's how I wrestle with it. So I know other people who struggle with needing that motivation, but that's not me. I'm the one that needs to turn off the motivation sometimes.
Any strength overextended becomes a liability. I've been saying that for years, in my executive coaching. I've said it here on the podcast, but the very thing that we have been gifted with, and folks, now lean into this, guys, because the nuance of this concept is this. And Graham, I think you just painted a brilliant picture for us. We're gifted with strength in a certain area of life, but under stress, overextended, under the influence of fear and shame, the very strength, it's like autoimmune disease of the soul. It turns in on us. Like for me, disc, high C with S. Very analytical, very driven, very type A, Enneagram 1, improver, strategist, overextended and under stress. Analytical becomes rigidity. Any strength overextended, folks, lean in, this is for you too. Any strength overextended becomes a liability. The question I have for you, Grant, and thank you for giving us like that behind the scenes look. When the Lord spoke to you out of Isaiah 30 in that way, how do we in life discern the season to know when to rest and receive or fight and conquer and overcome? Because when fear is a driver in our lives, when you got to put food on the table, I think at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do to feed your family. Yeah. But I'm talking like from a principle perspective in life. Teach us how to discern rest and receive in this season, or is this a season to fight, conquer, move forward? What do you say?
Bro, I think the answer is incredibly simple. I think you just ask the Lord, what season am I in? And the reason I say that, I don't mean to be flippant, is that the Lord has been telling me consistently in the last few years, this is a season to rest. Like, not that you're not supposed to do things and I'm in new seasons and I'm creating new things. And we're in this promotion right now with the book. It's like, he didn't say stop doing stuff. That's not what I heard, but I know what he's saying to me personally. To Graham, he's saying, let go, rest in me, trust me. And it's whether I'll decide to obey or take his advice or listen or not. So I've been in seasons where he's like, hey, go here, build this, try this. And I'm good with that. I don't resist those instructions from the Lord because that's my personality. It's when he's like, you can rest, is when I'm like, can I though? Can I? So to me, it's a trust thing. I don't trust the Lord when he says, let go and rest and watch me work. I'm like, oh, that sounds nice. But what if you don't come through? What if you don't do it? Then I'll be like, I should have been doing it. I should have been hustling in the background. And so that is my personal problem. But I feel like the Lord has been speaking clearly my whole life, telling me what season I'm in. And just half the time I'm good with it. And half the time I'm not good with it.
Yeah, so what I hear you saying, and folks, this is for you too, life is in his voice. Yeah. We began our conversation talking about the need to turn down distractions. When people are afraid, my first question to you was, when people are afraid, what happens to their decision-making? And we talked about turning down the noise to discern the still and the small. So what I hear you saying in a similar fashion is that discerning the season requires life in his voice, and life in his voice requires a priority of heart to say, I'm putting all my eggs in this basket because my pastor used to say this, like, I want to walk softly before the Lord. I want to, in the language of the psalmist in Psalm 24, I want to ascend the mountain of the Lord with clean hands and a pure heart, having not lift up my soul to that which is false. Right? Is that what I hear you saying in a way?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's a good one. I'm tracking.
So earlier we talked about what curiosity requires of us. What does becoming a risk taker require of us? I'm sure you coach people all the time who need to excel or mature in this area of life. When disappointment hits for the umpteenth time, the last thing we want to do is take another risk. We're like, what? I can't suffer another loss right now. What do you tell people?
Yeah, man, this is something I call the identity crisis intersection, and maybe this will be helpful for people. All of us have dreams. If dreaming isn't language you use, it could be hopes, desires, ambitions, goals. But you either had a dream in the past or you have one now. And that dream could be, a financial dream. I'd love to buy a house. I have a lot of friends who are like, I wish I could get into the housing market. I'd love to buy a house. That's a financial dream. It could be a career dream. I want to be able to have this position or start this business. It could be a relationship dream. We want to get married. I want to have a child. Whatever the dream is, we all have them at some point. And then life happens, and guess what? Dreams die. dreams die. Either, I mean, like they're either incredibly tragic, and we were talking off camera. I mean, like it can be like the loss of life. It can be relational dream dies, like the divorce happens. It could be a career dream died, like, you know, my dream of being a rock star, I never quite got that dream. So I felt like that dream had to die. And the reason why dreams are so painful is because our identities are attached to them. I don't think we get our full identities from our dreams, but that's why the only reason why a dream would hurt is because it represents part of us. Dreams are not these outside of us, these compartmentalized things. They're something God has put in our heart. There's something there. And so I call this moment after your dream dies the identity crisis intersection, because it's when your identity dies a little bit and you're at this fork in the road. And this is where you're kind of asking, like, what do you do next when the divorce happens? There's the death, there's the economy tanks, and you have to go bankrupt or whatever. Most people choose path one, which is to conform, which is to get back in line, which is to do like I did after I was 22 and I didn't get a record deal. It was the deals were falling apart. I had to choose to provide for my wife or chase this music dream longer, further with no pay. And when I chose to conform. I said, I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to kill the dream. And I'm just going to be a good citizen, pay my taxes, and take care of my wife. And I don't think that was a bad decision, but it was a decision to just like put my head down and play by everyone else's rules. And what I subtly made an agreement with was the idea that I don't get my dream. God doesn't give me my dream, or dreaming is foolish, or dreaming is selfish. And I had to create a worldview that made me feel okay with not getting my dream. But you have another choice, though, when you have that identity crisis intersection. You can actually dream again. And that might mean you chase, to your point, that dream a second, third, 100th time. It might mean dreaming a different version of your dream. God had to tell me that 4 years later, bro, I didn't tell you to stop dreaming. I have a different version of that dream. You weren't wrong about wanting to be on stages and wanting to perform and wanting to do something creative and wanting to leverage music and your gift of it. But I have new things coming for you you haven't even imagined yet. Your dream was actually a clue as to the way I wired you, Graham. But maybe you didn't get your version of it, but you have to learn to dream again. And that's what's so hard for people is the dream is killed, the joy is killed. They say, forget it. They give it like a one shot. Like so many of us stop dreaming after one dead dream. But I think the people that are joyful, the people that are youthful, the people like in scripture you see, Joseph didn't give up on his dream, even though it was, years later till it was realized. There's so many people who had a vision. It's the people that continue to dream again, that have joy, that have vitality, that have, I think, that joyful spirit when they walk with the Lord. They're not bitter against the Lord because they're like, hey, maybe it didn't turn out the way I thought. Okay, well, I trust the Lord. Maybe there's a different version of the dream, and he's going to reveal that to me.
Curiosity, risk-taking, dreaming again. Like, if I'm being totally honest with you, I so subscribe to that, and yet when I hear dream again, my stomach turns a little bit because I'm like, oh, I can't. Disappointment is so near. It's like right on the tip of my tongue. You and I have had private conversations on the phone about this. Like, oof. So having done all of that, for some folks, in no way am I insinuating that burnout is inevitable, but it happens. It's happened to me. It's happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about your relationship with burnout through all of this. How do you get your head above the water, and what happened?
My experience with burnout is when I'm pushing too hard because there's an underlying fear that I'm not doing enough, I'm not enough, and it's all up to me. So I know my burnout meters go up when I'm feeling those thoughts underneath. And if I'm quiet enough in my time in the morning with the Lord and I'm journaling out what I'm thinking, and I start to see that language of, I'm afraid that I'm not doing a good enough job. I mean, bro, like disappointment, what you just said, like real time, real talk, right? I am literally out on the road promoting book number 2. I'm a newish author. This is a transition in my career a little bit, author, speaker. I mean, I've been doing YouTube podcasting land forever, very comfortable there. And so I am both freaking pumped and excited because this stuff lights me up, and God has spoken to me as like, this is this next season for you. And yet I am so darn afraid. What if what if this is a repeat of that rock star dream where I had all the affirmation of peers and family and people that were behind me? You could do this. You're meant for this. You're talented enough. And it didn't turn out to be what if this is a repeat of that and I'm just disappointed again? It is so hard for me to even want to dream again. And I'm coaching people to do this. And it's hard for me because I'm so afraid of the disappointment. And I don't want to be, if I don't get my dream, I have to be disappointed in somebody. And I don't want to be disappointed at God, because I have my own judgments there. So I'm going to be disappointed at myself. Like, it's a weird thing. What do I do with my disappointment if the dream doesn't happen? And I'm afraid of that. So the easiest thing for me, Chris, would be to not pursue my author speaker dream. It's safer that it's just safer that way. And yet I will die on the inside. And so it's like, that's the choice. That's why you're not going to take a risk and get curious if there's not enough potential joy on the other side of, well, what if this wonderful thing happens? And for me, there is enough potential joy that I'm like, okay, here we go. But if there weren't, I would just stay safe, play it safe, and not risk the disappointment.
So why don't a lot of people navigate disappointment well, or better word, thoroughly? I think navigating disappointment is one of the greatest challenges that we have, whether you're a believer or not. But how we negotiate with and navigate through unresolved disappointment in life is huge. Why don't a lot of people do it well? What's your take?
I think people, let me word this carefully. I think it's very easy for all of us to be overly dramatic when something negative happens. And I'm not trying to discount like some real tragedy, but when you don't get your dream, the cards don't go your way, and you feel real pain, which you're allowed to feel, and it's real, I think we are so, to earlier language, so myopic in this case on the moment, on this specific outcome, that we're like shocked and we can't believe this happened, or like, what does this say about me? And we ascribe way too much meaning to the setback, to the disappointment, where God, outside of time, outside of the book of our lives that he's written, we're in chapter 3 and this bombshell happened on this page 37 in chapter 3, and we're stuck there. And he's like, bro, but if you flip to chapter 7, it is so good. And I can see that. And I know you can't see that, but you're reading the book too closely. And you're not like, well, this is hard to read, but I wonder how the story ends. And again, there's that wonder. There's this great line. Oswald Chambers has that great book about prayer. And he has this great line, maybe it's called If You Would Pray. It's so short, which it's such beautiful. I love short books. Thank you, Oswald. But he has this great line of like, prayer is really about wondering how God is going to solve it. And so he has this beautiful line of when he meets a challenge, he begins his prayers with, I wonder how God's going to answer this prayer. And it is so beautiful.
How do I get there?
It's a great place, because you don't have to, it's not, I tend to go to control. When something doesn't happen the way I want, I go to control.
Yep.
And that to your point, makes you rigid, and it's hard to control life because you can't control it. Mm-hmm. So then that doesn't work. Some people go to denial, it didn't happen. Some people distract. I try to go to control. And I love how Oswald goes to wonder. He goes to wonder of like, well, it takes off the pressure. It's not on me. It's on God to solve this one. And it makes you playful and curious. I wonder how God's going to do this. And so all that to say, I think when disappointment comes, if we're so myopic on like, I can't believe this happened, we miss the whole story, as opposed to like, Lord, this is painful. This flat out sucks, to use that language. I'm hurt by this. And you can go to the Lord and talk to him like that. King David did. But then you can end with, but I wonder how you're going to use this, or I wonder what you're going to do. And if there's something you want me to do related to this, let me know. But I'm putting it on you, Lord, to see what you're going to do with this. And I'm not disappointed in you, God. I'm just disappointed in what happened. But I trust that you are the God of fulfillment. You're the God of joy. You're the God of abundance. This is how Jesus described himself in the book of John. Like, I've come that you might have a rich and satisfying life, have life to the full. So like, it may not look that way right now, but I'm curious to see how you're going to pull it off, Lord.
So I think one of the greatest mistakes that a lot of us could make, if I were to distill what you just said, would be that too many of us, because of a fear motivation, where we started today, because of unresolved disappointment, we're too quick to label a season of life as the story of our lives.
Yes.
And in so doing, what is the consequence of doing that? When we do that?
Well, you just add to the narrative the story you're telling yourself. So then you won't be able to hear the truth. Like, you already have a story in your mind, and when you label things and ascribe meaning to things way too quickly, then you're just like giving fodder to the inner narrative that is so loud, that default loop in your head, that good luck hearing the voice of the Lord, good luck hearing your intuition. If you're not a person of faith, good luck hearing that still small voice that has wisdom, because you're like, yep, that just confirms my fears. That confirms the story I tell myself already. And bro, like, that's how most of us are living our lives, is like, we're reading a script. We wrote the script subconsciously and we're reading it. And it's like, bro, you should question who gave you that script. It's not from the Lord.
I feel like we need to get our good buddy Wade Joy in this conversation in so many ways, because we,
yes,
like, you and I have talked about this on the phone. Wade and I have talked about this a bunch. You and Wade have talked about this.
Yep.
I think stage of life is really interesting too. So what do you tell people who are exhausting, nearing midlife, who have given it their all in their 20s, and are now faced with an outcome, a destination they didn't at all plan for, and they're now wondering if they have anything left in the tank for the next season of life, the next 20 years? What do you say?
Yeah, man. I say, welcome to the club. You're not weird. You didn't do anything wrong. We all followed a path that we felt made sense, and it may not have been the path we wanted. We might have been kind of forced into that path, or it might have felt like the best choice available to us at the time. But a lot of the paths that are presented to us are just paths that other people have walked down. And if we look at the way their lives are turning out, they're just as exhausted and bitter and burned out. So like, you almost want to question whether that was a good path. There's very few people that seem to be getting more full of joy, lighter of heart, more curious as they age. So I would say you're not alone. You're not crazy. You didn't do anything wrong. But I would question the ticking clock like it's too late for me. This is one of the mental scripts that we all believe, and we may not say it out loud, but we function that way. I just don't buy into that. There's such a lie that we're running out of time. If I want to chase my dream or improve my life, it has to happen right now. And I don't know why we live this way. It could be the culture in the West, in America, but that's not the language of the Bible. The language of the Bible is like people getting started in their 80s, bro. Like Moses finally doing the thing he was meant to do in his 80s and had a 40-year run after that. You got tons of people who are just getting started in their 60s, 70s, 80s in Scripture. And so I think the Lord, if he's outside of time and a day to him is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years is like a day, like put your framework and your idea of time aside and your preconceived notions of how soon things have to happen and when it has to, all put that all away and just ignore the time side of it and get to the truth of, hey, who am I? Like the late Dan Miller said, the two most important questions you need to answer: who am I and why am I here? And those are big, hard questions. But most of us are too busy to answer those questions. And a big part of what I'm trying to do is help people answer those questions right now of like, hey, who am I? So how do we figure that out? A lot of it, if you're a person of faith, is talking to the person that made you and talking to the God of the universe and asking him questions and spending time with him. And then also paying attention to the giant clues he gave you all around. I think he gives us a lot of direction, going back to the joy question, in like our dreams, what lights us up, the things that just bring joy to us. Those aren't accidental. They're not the same as everybody else. Like, they're very unique, and they're a clue as to the way God wired you. And I think you need to press into who you are, what lights you up, the way God wired you, get childlike again, dream again, just to get to a place of like, hey, this is important to me. I don't know what to do with that maybe, or I don't know what that looks like. Those questions are okay to not answer right now. We just want to start with the place of like, if Jesus sat down with you, this is how I imagine it. If he sat down with you, Chris, he wouldn't be asking you timetable questions, right? He wouldn't be asking you like, well, how are you going to do that in 5 years? Or, you're already 46 or you're already 70, or like, what about those, years you wasted? He's not going to talk about the calendar or the timetable. He's going to talk about your identity. Jamie Winship is all. He's going to say, who did I make you to be? what dreams have I put in your heart? Like press into joy, not fear. So let's talk about what gives you joy. That might be a clue. He'll be wanting to talk to us about that for a long, long time until we're really comfortable with the way he made us. And then I believe he'll start to talk about the next assignment related to that identity, that joy. And then it's the question of whether we're having the guts or faith to go on that adventure with him. And adventures are scary. There's risk in adventures. You know, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan or a Hobbit fan, like Bilbo Baggins is that line about, you know, you never know what will happen when you step outside your door. Like it's both exciting and scary at the same time. But I believe that if you're exhausted, it's because you've been living out of alignment. You're not living in the way God made you. And this is a great time to just start to ask the Lord, who did you make me to be? What gives me joy? And he'll give you a better picture of what to do with it. You've got your whole life ahead of you. The time is on your side. I even think that's a Rolling Stones song, right? Time is on your side. Like you're not running out. I don't really believe in that time is running out. I don't think that's the abundance mindset God would give us. That is a scarcity mindset by definition. It's like, oh, I'm running out of time. What would you do if you weren't running out of time? Those are more interesting questions to me.
It's amazing that you took us right here. This is exactly where I wanted to go next in the conversation, because one of my favorite quotes from you is that frustration comes when we are trying to live out of alignment with our design. Moments ago, you talked about the mental scripts that a lot of us live with. So let me kind of fuse the two questions together. If frustration comes when we are trying to live out of alignment with our design, and to quote the Stones, I can't get no satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
What other mental scripts are all too pervasive in a lot of us, Graham?
One is, I don't have enough resources.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough connections. That was one of the scripts that held me back from starting my author journey 4 years ago. I was like, I don't have enough connections into the author world. I don't know anybody that's written a book, blah, blah, blah. That it turned out to be a lie, a bold-faced lie, actually. It's amazing how I thought it was pretty accurate, but it wasn't accurate actually at all. There's the, what will people say if I blank, fill in the blank? What will people say if I pull my kids out of school and homeschool? What will people say if I quit this job and take a lower paying job somewhere else? What will people say? One of them for me, bro, in the Christian world, like there's a lot of Christian on Christian hate and crime. When I was in a serious season of burnout spiritually, I was like, we were part of a church plant. I was the worship leader, the men's small group leader, an elder at age 22. Go figure that, deal with that how you will. I was like all these things, and I was just overwhelmed and burned out and starting a business at the same time. And I remember when I had to step down from leading a Bible study, the men's Bible study, it was just too much. And I got judged hardcore by a bunch of people, including my pastor. Was like, you can't cut it, But and I knew that was going to happen. My fear was, well, what will people say if I say I can't? I got to step down from this. And so there's a lot of fear of what people will say. These are all mental scripts that literally stop us from taking the first or next step. And we rehearse them over and over in our minds. And those are the common ones that come up for me right now, bro. And they're insidious, and they happen 24/7.
So here's a take home for listeners and viewers here. What I heard you say, Graham, is that assignment and alignment come out of identity.
100%.
Question begs then, Graham, I'd love to know your nuanced thought on this. What is success? I think of the old John Wooden quote. Let me see if I can find it real fast. I heard it years ago. Yeah, here it is. The peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing you did your best to become the best that you are capable of becoming. I think that's in alignment even with what we've just prescribed, what we've just described. But I'd love to hear your take. When you think about alignment and assignment and identity and risk-taking and curiosity, at the end of the day, what's success? What is success for you, Graham?
This is like messy for me. Like I'm trying to figure out what success looks like. I am needing to redefine success for myself in this present moment. So I don't have a good answer for what success looks like for me. I have some parts of it, pieces of it. a marriage that lasts, where there's joy and love and self-sacrifice. That I have a good relationship with my children when they become adults. I have a 15 and 12-year-old daughter, 2 daughters, and we're lifelong friends. That I walk with Jesus my whole life. That I'm doing work that's making an impact in people's lives. And then for me, that in the season, I want more lightness of heart, be more present-minded, not thinking. I'm always in the future, living in the future. So these are some of the nuances of success for me. But this is interesting because even that quote with Coach, when it's like, I think there's 3 things that people want in life, Chris, and I think we need to separate them because sometimes we overlap them as if they're the same thing. I think people want success, however they define it, but I think they also want satisfaction in life, and you alluded to it earlier. And those are not always the same things. You can be successful and not satisfied, and you can be satisfied and not successful. But I think we want to be successful. No one wants to be unsuccessful. Like no one wants I don't tell my children, I want you to have an unsuccessful life. Success is a good thing, and I know it's been hijacked as if it's a bad thing. It's a good thing. But you got to define success. But you also want to be satisfied in life, and those are not the same thing. And then I think the third S to be a good Baptist preacher, if I were one, is service, right? We want to be of service to people because I think that's the way God wired us. So we want success, satisfaction, and service. If you have, this is getting a little interesting. If you have success and satisfaction, but no service, those overlap. And to me, that's mastery. Like that's when you're highly successful, you're satisfied in the thing you're doing, you're getting to a sweet spot of mastery. That's great. But it still could be just you in your little basement. There's no service to other people. If you have satisfaction and service to other people, you have joy, because that's where joy comes from, is when you're serving people, and not just like, well, I did the soup kitchen, but I kind of hate that. No, what's an area where you can serve people and it brings you satisfaction? That's where true joy comes out. And then if you overlap success and service, that's where impact is. Because service feels good, but when you're successful in your service, you have impact. And I think we long for impact, whether that's wide, reaching lots of people. I think like a Billy Graham who had impact far and wide, or deep, right? Like you discipled like your kids deep your whole life, and you had deep impact, deep service. So all of those are things we want. They're not all the same thing. And my premise, Chris, is that the white hot center of that, what is the thing that leads to all of those things? It's pressing into your uniqueness, your identity, the way you were uniquely wired. If you do not figure this out and do not embrace your uniqueness, you're going to struggle to have success, satisfaction, and service. You might get 1 or 2 of them. You're not going to get all 3.
This is fascinating. Just to turn the page a little bit and just kind of pull folks into what's been running through my mind. If I look at success, satisfaction, service, your words being white hot in a space of convergence, living distraction free. I've been thinking about something lately. I'm on this, I don't know, newfound quest, whatever. It's not philosophical, guys, so it's not like I'm trying to preach. I'm just kind of unpacking this in real time with you, Graham, as a friend. Like I'm on this quest toward minimalism in a fresh way, at least for me. Just 2 weeks ago, I was reading and researching life in the early 1950s. The average home size for a family of 4 was 983 square feet. So to me, it's emblematic of what's possible. Like I like my life. I like simplicity. I love good books, good food cooked at home. In the last little bit, I've come to kind of nail a few key pillars for me right now. I'm on a social media total detox right now, fast, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Maybe that sounds a little more fancy than it is. I've just deleted social media from my phone and set up autoresponder messages. Yeah. And even to tie that to what we said earlier in the conversation, I'm hearing the Lord more clearly. A few pillars for me right now: sleep well, eat well, move my body and lift heavy weights, deepen my intimacy with the Lord, savor my friends and family. That's it.
That's a life well lived.
Yeah. And in doing so it's why I was researching the small home thing. I'm thinking, what if I were to downsize my living in such a way that I could live distraction-free and thus hit success, satisfaction, service, white-hot convergence without having to think about some of the superfluous thoughts? Again, this is not a right or wrong, guys. This is just, I'm just kind of stream of consciousness right now with Graham. What's your take on all that, Graham? I just would love to hear, like, forget that I'm a friend, you're my coach. What do you say to all that?
Oh, I say you're onto something that's brilliant. This is something that my friend John Gordon, he writes about in his book, The One Truth, which is high state of mind, low state of mind. And his premise is when we're in a low state of mind, we've got a bajillion thoughts in our head. Like he draws these two circles, and one circle's got all these dots in it, and that's low state of mind. And then there's a circle that's a high state of mind when you feel great, and there's hardly any dots in it. And to me, what you're describing is moving from low state of mind to high state of mind. And if you want to use the word hacking, you could use that, or stacking the deck in your favor. The fewer things you have to think about, the fewer distractions, your brain, like it's that language in Acts 2 where they ate their meals in gladness and simplicity of heart, right? Like the simpler your life, and complexity is inevitable and not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm a big fan of simplicity. I feel like simplicity is a form of wealth. Peace comes from that. And so there's so much there that you're pressing into, and it makes sense to me. If you had less to think about and less distractions, you would be in a higher state of mind more often, which means you would be present and fully able to hear God's voice, see the needs in front of you, and have more joy. So I'm all about what you're talking about.
It's why Steve Jobs wore the same thing every day. It's why
Exactly.
I think a lot of parochial schools have kids wear uniforms.
Yep.
I really do. There's something, I was telling a buddy a few weeks ago, there's something attractive to me, and maybe it's temperament. That's like, I have 10 of the same polo or 10 of the same t-shirts and my favorite jeans, and that's just what I do. I love hoodies in the fall. I've got X number of, I'm eliminating the need to expend calories and energy on superfluous decisions, and in so doing, conserve the calories toward making more meaningful decisions. That's just me reflecting. If you were my coach in this moment,
Let's go. Yeah. I'd be slow clapping you right now. This is a big insight.
This is me reflecting upon you. So I've been thinking lately, Graham, wild thought. We'll see if it happens. Buying a plot of land, getting a pre-designed home plan, and building not a tiny home, bigger than that, a small enough home that's one less decision that I have to go, oh, shoot, it's Saturday morning, I got to do this and this, and what about this and this and this? I'm going, Lord, what have you called me to do? I've set my face like a flint, Isaiah 50. I don't know, Graham. It's just stream of consciousness. It's what's been on top of my mind, coming out of some burnout. Yeah, I just want to sort of talk out loud.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm not your financial advisor, but I would say don't make big financial decisions in the moment, like sit on it for a while. But other than that, bro, and that's half of a joke. I think it's great. I think you saw probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I'm coming out of the global recession. I mean, minimalism boomed, right? So many great books came out and documentaries because people were like, dude, they're questioning their values again. Like, okay, I lost everything. Like, what was that meaningful anyway? And it was great. And I think we're due for another reset type thing. And you're probably going to see more people thinking like you're thinking, Chris, about what really matters. And I thought it was back then, less stuff is just, I'll be happier. And some people have it's better for the environment, blah, 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 blah. To me, the biggest win is what you're describing, which is simplicity of thought, fewer thoughts. Because when I have fewer thoughts, I'm actually happier. I'm actually in my right state of mind. And so when I get weighed down with all these other thoughts and things I have to keep up with, that just like I lose track of not just the mission and what God has for me, but I don't feel like I'm myself. Like I know those days when I don't feel like I'm myself. And if I'm being honest, it's probably I could point to too many thoughts in my head, good or bad. And the opposite is true. When I have clarity of thought, that's why you feel great on vacation. I don't think it's because you're on vacation, it's a beautiful place. I think we live in a lot of beautiful places. There's beauty all around us. I think it's because you brought a little suitcase with you and that's all the stuff you have with you. And there's no responsibilities, of course. And I think maybe it's not accurate of what real life looks like, but it's very emblematic of why you feel so great because you're carrying less with you, even physically, bro. That's why people go out into nature, So I think there's something here, and the Lord's been telling me simplicity, simplicity. He literally told me last fall, minimize, minimize, when I was asking about my business. So I was asking about certain team members, and so I felt like the Lord said, get rid of your entire team. I kept my one customer service person. My wife, Shay, had a vision of me in a tiny home sweeping the floor. So she had a vision of me climbing up a mountain with a little light backpack, and I was smiling because I was so light. When you're not carrying a lot of stuff, you can move faster and you feel freer. So this has actually been part of my story the last 10 months. I'm now starting to apply it to, okay, our personal lives, our possessions, what we spend our time doing. So this, to me, this is ringing a chord for sure.
So how then, not why, how do many of us self-sabotage in such a sneaky way that we don't even recognize we're doing it?
In life in general?
Yeah, like you're a coach, you can see your clients, you can see things that your clients can't see because none of us see the world as it is. We see it as we are. How do we then self-sabotage in inflection moments in life in such a sneaky way that we wouldn't even label it as self-sabotage? And in so doing, we're just used to the behavior that we keep running ourselves ragged and in circles.
I mean, I think two things come up for me. One, I do believe conformity is a big culprit here. And by that, I mean, we abdicate our decision-making to the culture around us because we're tired, we're exhausted, life is hard. And so it's much easier to say, well, okay, well, how do they think about money, managing money? How are they doing marriage? What are they doing with their kids? Okay, fine, we'll do that. So I think, and then we end up like doing things out of alignment with our even values. They're not even lined up with our values because we're abdicating our decision making to what everyone else is doing. That's part of it. There's another piece to it that I'm interested in. You know, I don't know if you're a Gay Hendricks fan at all, but like he has this great book called The Big Leap, and it's a little woo-woo at times, but the most powerful thing in that book that I think is worth exploring is something he calls the upper limit problem. And he likens humans to like a thermostat in your home that controls the temperature. And we have these upper limits that we place on ourselves subconsciously. We don't actually know we're doing it. And it could be, I see this in coaching business owners. It's either like, I'm really only allowed to make this amount of money. And as their business succeeds, they start to feel uncomfortable because of some money story they've never processed or thoughts they've never processed. And they will self-sabotage, to use that language, and subconsciously even, and kind of do something to blow up their business so it never quite gets past. I have a friend and a client who he came to a mastermind event I was doing in Tampa just a few months ago, and seeing him draw on the board, he was like, here's my business. It peaked at like $300K a year, and then it fell apart, and I had some personal issues, and then I rebuilt it back up, and now it's around 305K a year. And when I saw him draw it on the board, I was like, bro, do you realize that you've rebuilt your business multiple times, and every time you rebuild it, it always caps out at 300K? I was like, in a business model, it's technically unlimited. Do you think it's a coincidence, or do you think that you are somehow just viewing yourself as a $300,000 a year business owner, and you're somehow not letting yourself grow past it? It's an uncomfortable question to ask, but he almost started to cry because something unlocked for him where he was like, oh my gosh, it's almost an identity. I view myself as a $300,000 a year person. And this is the language we'll use in business. But the same is true of an upper limit of how much love and affection you allow yourself to have. That's why some people stay in tough, abusive relationships, because they don't think they're worthy of something better. They go right back to a very similar limit of how much love. And so I think there's this interesting something there. I don't know what it is that we might do to ourselves, but if we don't identify what are either the limits we've placed on ourselves, if you want to use Gay's language, or the narrative of this is who I am and this is all I'll ever be, we don't speak it, but we're thinking it subconsciously. If we don't identify it, we'll never blow past it or allow ourselves to fully be who God says we are, not who we say we are or who our parents have said we are or the circumstances, but who does God say we are? What does God say we're capable of? It's probably a lot more and a lot wilder and a lot more beautiful than you've allowed it to be.
So behind this is self-awareness, and I think self-awareness, I wrote about this in my book too, the difference between, rather the relationship between self-awareness and self-knowledge. How do we leverage self-awareness without it becoming self-deprecation?
Oh, that's a good question. So my wife Shay and I, we sometimes joke about how we got to quit journaling because we can get so introspective and spend so much time with the Lord, sharing our thoughts, praying, listening, but like writing down our thoughts. And journaling is really powerful, by the way. And I, as someone that made fun of people who journaled, like I've had to embrace it, and it's been so powerful for me. But we're both kind of type A people, and I think we've swung the other way. We're just like, here's what I'm struggling with, Lord, and these are the narratives I'm believing, and like it's so much that it becomes on the line of self-deprecation, where we're really hard on ourselves. So to me, the solution is affirmations, and affirmations meaning let's affirm what God says is true about us and what we believe is true about ourselves when we're in our right mind. Like when God has given us a picture of what's possible, it may not be true yet, but like example for me is when I'm really I'm too self-aware about how I'm not as good of a speaker or author as I want to be, and it becomes self-deprecation, I have to go back to the affirmations of God has given me a vision where he's called me a speaker. And he said, yeah, I see you're not quite where you want to be yet, but I'll tell myself, no, I see myself as a great world-class speaker and an author that's writing meaningful thought leadership books that truly help people. I have to almost speak that over me and then speak truth from scripture and specific promises God's given me. Those are the things that have to counteract the self-deprecation. So I want to be honest to a point, but not like stay in honesty land, because that's what Jamie Winship will talk about, right? Confession is truth-telling. So truth-telling is the very first thing you do, but if all we do is truth-tell and never let God tell us what he sees in us and what he believes in us, and let us even sit in our own dreams and visions that God's given us, I think he gives us an image or a vision almost for us to be able to just go back and relive or pre-live a moment as a gift to us. Like, hey, I gave you this image, sit in it for a while, marinate in it for a while. You got to live there too, because that's what gets you back to the excitement and the joy of what could be, even if it's not a reality yet. And I imagine like a Joseph in the jail cell, like he probably landed on self-deprecation. This is a conjuncture at this point. I don't know in the scriptures exactly what he was thinking in prison, but he probably could one day be like, dude, this sucks. Like what I am a loser. How did I get here? But then I'm sure other days he was like going back to the dream that God gave him and like, oh man, but there's got to be something here and there's got to be a purpose and it's going to be beautiful, and sort of pre-living this dream. I feel like his dream was a gift to just like get him through the dark times until it was realized. So I think affirmations and the getting back to the joy in the dream, that's probably the only thing I could hold on to. You got to have, confess some truth telling, but then you got to have some other truth come back in and fill that void. Otherwise, you're going to stay in self-deprecation mode forever.
Jamie and I have talked about this for a while, and his language, he would say confession, repentance, then transformation. I would reflect it to say we bring God our true. He gives us his truth, and when we receive his truth, John 16:13, when the Spirit of truth comes, he will lead us and guide us into all truth. Truth is greater than true because truth sets us free. When we abide in his word, we'll know the truth, and the truth will set us free. John chapter 8. You know John Maxwell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think about Maxwell. Like I was reading Maxwell when I was 12, and I'd be curious about your thoughts about this. I can hear John in my head right now. Every day I read, every day I file. And I'd be curious, what are you reading right now, Graham? I'm reading a couple of books right now, but I think folks engaged in this conversation would want to say, hey, Graham, what are you reading right now? What's stoking the flames of your soul right now?
Right now on my nightstand are probably 32 books that I'm going to read.
It's a big nightstand.
The one I'm actively, it's ridiculous. The one I'm actively in right now is Play the Man by Mark Batterson.
Oh, dude. Yes.
So that was recommended a million times, and I don't know why I haven't read it. So I'm in that right now.
Mark's coming back on the pod. Mark's coming back here on the podcast, and I'm excited to talk with him again. What are you learning from that? We'll put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really at the beginning of that. I just read through Circle Maker. We got to spend some time with Mark in DC a few weeks ago at the group of entrepreneurs I was a part of, and I love being around him in person. And reading his books is like hanging around him, because it's like when you need to dream again, like he's a guy that will fuel that flame, fan that flame of, dude, God's really a dreamer. Like God is a what if God. God is like, that's how he created. Like, what if we created water and light and people and animals? He is a creator. He dreams big. We should dream big too. And like, so if you're feeling discouraged, there's something there that Mark has a gift about helping you dream. And then with this book specifically, Play the Man, it's been a while since I've read a biblical manhood book. And all the ones in the back in the day, I feel like I read were very much like action, like what you do as a man. This one seems to be more character in terms of like what, and that's I appreciate that. Like, what does a man need? Because men look very different, and some of the actions look like. And again, it's not behavior modification. It's like what is the heart of a man in the way God's designed it. So I've been appreciating that right now.
This is probably the fastest conversation. We're an hour and 5 in, and there's just, I think, so much more that we could chat about today. I would love to know, Graham, what's a question you wish more people would ask you? Maybe even in the coaching domain. Something that you feel like, dang, I just wish people wouldn't evade this.
I wish clients specifically would ask me, Graham, what do you see in me?
What's the power in that question?
The power in that question is, you alluded to it, is that we can't see ourselves very, very clearly, right? And I don't think other people are the only way to figure out who you are. In fact, I write about it. I feel like it's actually kind of flawed at times, because people only really see themselves a lot. So it's hard for them to give you good counsel because they don't fully know who you are. So you need to do some of that deep work yourself so you can filter godly counsel through it. But people come to me and they want tactics, they want strategies, they want what's the answer. And what I want to give people is what I think everyone needs, which is a father figure or mother figure to say, hey, when I see you, Chris, here is what I see. And that could be potential. It's a very open-ended thing. That could be a skill set. That could be patterns that I've recognized. Like, that's, to me, imputing belief and speaking life into someone. Like, this is, I think, what Jesus did with his disciples. And I'm imagining private conversations that weren't recorded and pulling them aside because they were all different. And the thing that probably kept them going is not just like, here's who I am, follow me. But he probably was saying, Matthew, here's what I see in you, bro. This is why I chose you. John, here's what I see in you. That like is so life-giving when someone who you respect sees something in you. That's the greatest gift you could give somebody. So I wish people would ask, especially in a client setting, like, Graham, day one, like before we get going, as you've gotten to know me a little bit, what do you see in me? And then day 3 and week 10, like, what do you see in me? Because we're not going to see it ourselves. And when someone else says it, it almost becomes reality because it's been spoken and I can't unhear it and I can't unnoodle it of like, well, I'm going to think about that for the rest of my life because that's what Chris said about me when he saw me. So I think that leads to really good stuff when someone asks that question.
I had mentioned Wade earlier in the conversation. We both just love him so much. Wade, if you're listening, hey, dude. I think because the three of us are in similar stages of life, maybe not seasons of life, because I don't have kids, and finishing well has been like tip of the spear for me. I've recently reread Arthur C. Brooks's From Strength to Strength, and he talks in it about moving from fluid intelligence to crystallized intelligence. In other words, knowledge to wisdom. So like I'm in this transition phase in life. Gordon MacDonald would say, hey, from ages 38 to 42, it's like a second adolescence. Actually, that was Arthur Brooks that said that, second adolescence. And I'm right there and like, oh, Lord, what have you called me to do right there? Finishing well is tip of the spear for me. What do you thinking about and prioritizing as you, Graham, think about 30 years from now, 40 years from now, finishing life well? What's the tip of the spear for you?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it comes down to four things. Marriage, faithfully married to Shay. Like, even if and when it continues to get messy, because we've had our seasons and it will, like, no one finishes marriages well these days. And I want to do it as an example to my daughters, and I want to do it as a light and darkness to the world, as an example to the world. So I imagine, like, I'm 41, so I imagine I'm in my 70s and 80s, like, we're still happily married. We're actually happier than we are today, because, like, I feel like today we're still figuring life out. I would say that I've trained my children up well, and I don't think that ends at 18, right? Like, I want to be a friend and mentor in their lives for the rest of their lives, a resource for them, their husbands, to come to their children. Like, I'm not going to control their lives. I'm not even going to tell them what to do, because I don't think a good coach even tells people what to do, or a mentor tells them what to do. You help guide them to arrive at insights, but I want to be that resource for them so that they're connected with me. Walking faithfully with the Lord. And to me, what that looks like is having the guts to trust him and follow him wherever he tells me to go. That's a faith journey I'm still on. And then the last thing that comes up for me is like, I'm a content guy. So I think about, like, how much, like you mentioned John Maxwell, I don't know how many books he's written, like 100 books. Like to me, that's a legacy. That's not an ego play. That's like just straight practical. How can we duplicate the mind that God gave him and, like, help his wisdom be more useful to more people for more time long after he's gone? And that's what writing books and creating podcasts and YouTube videos can do. And it's like, I want to create a ton of useful content that goes, like, to people that I'll never meet, read, or listen to, and it helps them. Because to me, the content piece is a discipleship piece. Like, if Jesus had a podcast, if he had podcasting and YouTube and, like, the printing press, like a blog, like, I feel like he would be the most monstrous content creator on the planet. I don't know how much he would put out. Like, his frequency would probably be, like, in silence on a mountaintop most of the time. But every once in a while, he would come down and drop a freaking awesome podcast episode or write a book. And because to me, that's all it is discipleship on a mass scale. And it's like, goes beyond my physical limitations. And so when I think of the end of the life and finishing well, it's like, to me, it's creating as much useful content as possible on the topics that God wants me to talk about, to the people he wants me to talk about to. That's all that matters to me.
You've nailed my heartbeat. I was thinking the other day, why do I actually do this? Why do I write books? And it's for that. I think about Proverbs. A righteous man will leave an inheritance for his children's children. And that's way beyond just cash. That's a spiritual legacy, a heritage. And I want to write words that will outlast me. I want to have podcasts that, Lord knows how long, my YouTube channel is going to stay alive, or, the podcast will be on the air. But long after I'm gone, there's a legacy of, I don't know, hopefully a well-lived life, a life that I've heard recently. I don't remember who coined these phrases, but not resume virtues, but eulogy virtues. I lived well. Fascinating.
Yeah, my wife does that. She tries to get people to write their eulogy. It's a helpful exercise. I was just thinking about, for you real quick, Chris, going back to that success, satisfaction, and service, like if those three circles converge, I can't speak for you, but I imagine part of your uniqueness at the white hot center of those three is the content you're creating, because you're one of the ways you can be of massive service to people and be successful in that service. And if you seem to get satisfaction out of writing and speaking and coaching, and you're doing that on the podcast, this podcast is a stage. Every episode is a keynote. If that seems to be a beautiful convergence of, like, wow, a life well lived, that's part of your uniqueness. And that's not the only thing you do, But like that is a good example where you could plot your podcasting and your writing right in the middle of that, where like, let's reach as many people as possible, be as deeply serviceful as possible, and make sure I'm enjoying it along the way. Because if those three things are happening, that's probably part of what your purpose is in life is to do.
Yeah, that's so good. And in hearing you say that, it creates a reminder, another level of desire for me to say, what do I need to strip away, the superfluous stuff, so that I can give my all to steward this thing really well. At the end of the day, that's what it is for me, for you as a believer, as a disciple of Jesus, to steward that which he has entrusted to me for the sake of eternity. We're part of his eternal purpose, and I'm thankful for that. What a conversation today, Graham. You're such a great friend, and you've been such a voice of encouragement in my life. I don't want to finish this conversation today without giving you an opportunity to talk about your brand new book today. I think it's a must-read for folks. Why this message now? What's burning?
The short answer is God told me to write it.
Yeah.
And it's not, to be honest, bro, it's not the book I thought I'd be writing in this season of my life. But he made it incredibly clear that this is what he wanted me to do. And so even the writing of this book, different than my first one. My first one felt like this is content I know and I can teach in my sleep. This book was like, it's very much a Jeremiah moment of God put his words in my mouth. I literally had to like, what are we talking about in chapter 3, Lord? I don't quite understand. And then he would give me ideas and I have to write it. And for me, it was very frustrating because I had no control over it. And it came when it came. But it's funny to see it done and written and sharing it with people and realizing, man, this book is needed right now because nobody knows who they are. Nobody knows or even has the courage to live as themselves fully. And that's the idea of rebel is not someone that just breaks the law, right? The name of the book is Rebel. It's literally, to be a rebel is to be different, is to not conform, is to not be be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed. To me, it's Romans. It's literally finding out, okay, the world's going this way. Who does God say I am? How am I designed? Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to show up in my relationships, my finances, in my work, in the way I manage my time, my health, my spirituality? And that takes work and it takes guts to be who you actually are, because people, they're going to challenge it. They're not going to like it. They're going to want you to be like yourself. And I think we're in a moment right now where everyone is kind of copying everybody else for a variety of reasons. And it's time to not be safe. It's time to not, especially for Christians, people of faith. It's like, bro, now is the time to get serious about asking the Lord, who am I? Do some of this deep inner work, getting clear on like what lights you up, how you're wired, and then coming up with values that you and your family are going to live by and pressing into your uniqueness because, dude, God designed you a certain way. You're literally hampering his strategy by not operating the way you're designed. He made you on purpose, for a purpose, the way he made you. And if you would just embrace it, I think you're going to see more success in those 6 areas of life. You're going to be more satisfied. I think you'll have more service. And so I'm getting fired up about this, Chris, because to me, it's the beautiful message of helping people, not become something they're not, but get back to literally the way they actually are, the real them underneath it all.
What I love about your message and what I love about you, Graham, and it is so part and parcel of this podcast because we're not here for the silver bullet fixes. We're not here for the glitz. What we are here for, which is why I am so focused and intent on this message of mental health, emotional health, and spiritual maturity, is because all of this life is a stewardship issue. Paul in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 says, hey, may your whole spirit, your whole soul, your whole body be sanctified through and through, made ready for the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. And I'm just saying, wholeness, transformation, being a rebel in the acronym that you present is a stewardship issue because this life of ours is short and it counts for eternity. And I want to hear well done. I want to finish well. I want to be entrusted with the true riches, as Jesus talked about. And so, dude, what a conversation. Anything else you want to just drop and leave for us today? I've just so loved this. This one goes out to Maria Cochrane.
You're good, man. You get brownie points.
Yeah.
I would just say, man, Can I just speak some life into you?
What a gift. I'd love
I
to
think
receive.
you are a great example of a rebel in the way I present in the book.
Really?
In that you are showing up fully as you. Even in this conversation we've just had, and all your episodes, you're this way with every guest, but you are fully showing up as the authentic Chris Cook. Like you're willing to be vulnerable and transparent. You're willing to own the things that you're struggling with. You're willing to share the things you're excited about. Like in this whole conversation, you shared something you're struggling with. You shared something you're really excited about, like maybe the minimalism thing, maybe the smaller house, the plot of land. I saw you be high. I saw you be low. But I never saw you be something you're not. I never saw you try to like read the room. How should I be in this conversation? What mask or persona should I put on? Like I never saw any of that. And you never do. And so you're a great example of, it's not perfect because we're living in a fallen world, but some of the freedom that comes from being you and just letting yourself be you and letting God just reveal more of what that means, because it's easy. It's way easier to be you, and you're doing a good example. You're a great job of that. Like you're that's why your podcast is different, because you're not the traditional host. You don't have a script necessarily, even though you prepare. You don't have an agenda, even though you do have an angle you want the show to be about. Like you toe that line so beautifully and so authentically that I think that's why your show is so good, and why guests want to come back, and why people like Maria Cochrane listen faithfully, because it's real, man. And there's not very much that's real anymore out there. Everything is produced based off of what we think will do well. And there's nothing wrong with being strategic,
Of course
but
not.
there's something more powerful about being who you are, and that's who you are, Chris. Like since I spoke
Thanks,
with
my
you
friend.
and Wade connected us, like
Yeah.
you are an example of being a rebel, and there's benefits, not just for you, but everyone else around you is benefiting from it.
This is probably, I don't know if this will segue into just another hangout with you on the phone, maybe, but I'll just kind of lay it here on the podcast as we land this plane too. This has been such a hard year. And again, I don't want to wax philosophical or even just be super spiritual and platitude or whatever. But I do look at the fact that out of seasons of hiddenness and brokenness and crushing, those who bear forth the fruit of the Spirit will, through their lives, under the leading of the Holy Spirit, bring forth, I believe, fresh oil and new wine. You know, Revelation 21, I think, talks about how our leaves will be the healing for nations. That's what this is for me, Graham. Again, it's a stewardship thing. First of all, thank you. Jesus said a prophet is not without honor except for in his own town, and for you as a friend to just honor me so graciously means the world. Thank you. But I say this, and I say this on the podcast a lot. Man, I want to see us grow up. I want to see us mature. I want to see us steward this thing well. At the time of recording here, we're on summer break in the solo series, and I've never done a solo series here on the podcast. You know, like nearing 400 episodes. Graham, I've never done a solo show, and I typically throw the pod on encore episodes during July, and I felt led of the Lord to do solo shows, and man, it's just been me teaching, and it's felt good, and the resonance from people has been validating, because I want people to grow up in Christ. I want people to mature. I want people to be healthy and whole from the inside out. So all that to say, thank you, bro. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean every word of it. And the solo episodes have been fire. So
Thank you.
just a side note, if you ever want to do them
Oh
again
my gosh.
sometime,
Yeah.
a great idea.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Well, hey, I want people to track with you. I want people to stay connected to you. Obviously, we're going to put a link in the show notes to the new book, but I'd love for people to get connected to all things Graham Cochrane and just learn more about you. How can they do that?
Yeah. If you want to hang out on social, the only place I'm ever at is Instagram at the Graham Cochrane. Otherwise, YouTube, the Graham Cochrane Show podcast, or grahamcochrane.com.
Awesome. Anything else today?
Bro, just keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks,
I
Graham.
know today in particular was a hard day that we might not have even have done this episode. And this is something that's, as one content creator to another, it takes a lot of professionalism and a lot of risk to continue to make content on a day when you don't feel like making content.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes that's when God brings out the best in the content. So thank you for still having the conversation. I know
Thanks.
I gave you an opportunity to not, and you said, no, let's keep going. Let's do it today anyway.
Yeah.
And I know it's been a hard 48 hours for you. So thank you for still showing up and serving not just me, but all the people listening.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Listen, folks, I'm fine. Let me just kind of put some context to what Graham just said. 2 days ago at the time of Graham's and my conversation here, I lost a really close friend. She and her 2 sons were killed in a tragic car accident. So like I'm on the heels of that. It's been a heavy day. She was like a little sister to me. So I'll in fact just say it publicly. Janae, love you, miss you. And yeah. Graham, thanks for today. Means a lot, dude.
Thank you, brother. You're a gem. Keep it up.